Okay, so welcome back to the show, Molly. It's great to have you. Let's jump right in. There's just so much to talk about. In a recent article that you wrote for Vanity Fair, the question was asked, and I quote, "If being a convicted felon is so great for Donald Trump, why are Republicans freaking out?" It's such a great question.
Right.
So I'm going to ask the person who actually came up with that one, what's the answer? And why are they freaking out?
Because I think they know it actually does hurt him. I mean, I think, you worked in this world with these people. I mean, I think they're trying to work the refs, right? They're saying, this isn't a big deal. It doesn't matter. But they know. I mean, I think Republicans are really worried that it will matter. Don't you think? I mean, what do you think?
I do. When I was reading the article, I was saying to myself, I can't wait for the very first poll to come out. And you know me, I don't put much credence in any of these polls. But when you see polls coming out that's saying 71% of GOP do not believe that Trump, now as a convicted felon, will change their minds in terms of who they're going to vote for, I think the way that they're phrasing the article on that, or the poll, is inaccurate. Right. Basically, what they're saying is 30% of the GOP will not vote for this guy because he is a convicted felon. And one thing that we also know is that the polls show the two, Trump and Biden, running neck and neck. Well, if you lose 30% and that's only the GOP, we know that 65% of independents say that they will not vote for Donald Trump if he is a convicted felon. I don't know. Sounds to me like the race is not as close as some of the other polls would like you to believe.
That's my big question. And it's like, we don't really know because, I mean, like in Europe last week, there was all of these election results and all the polls were off in Europe, right? Like the right won much more handily than we thought they would. The pollsters thought they would. That was true in Germany too. So there clearly is some kind of polling problem, but the problem is you have so little information to go on that people just keep working off of polls. And now it creates this sort of impossible situation.
Yeah, I mean, we're continuously talking about it. Every time I see you on, and that's basically every single day on MSNBC, we keep saying the same thing over and over and over again. The information ecosphere is so inaccurate today. I mean, you turn on, for example, TikTok or Instagram, and you will see articles that Trump has not showed up to his pre-sentencing report. Then again, you turn around, you watch the other news stations, and it said that he virtually appeared with the pre-sentencing probation officer with his lawyer, Todd Blanche, from Mar-a-Lago. First of all, I have a question which I don't understand. If we're really going to create a scenario where everyone is supposed to be treated the same, why is it that he was able to do it virtually? I've actually never heard of anyone being permitted to actually do their PSR virtually. My understanding is also you got to piss into a cup in order to see what drugs that the person may be on. There is a whole section of the pre-sentencing report, the PSR, that talks about your medications, that talks about your health, that talks about what drugs that you might be on or taking right now.
Yeah.
He's not going to have that.
No, I mean, he definitely is getting special treatment. The larger question is, like, it costs taxpayers a lot to bring him in. It's quite disruptive. It's probably better to have him at Mar-a-Lago. But the question, I think, is, what kind of a special treatment? I mean, do you think, here's my question that I think about a lot is Todd Blanche
a slope? The stupidest lawyer of all time? Yes.
Do you think that Trump really is okay with Todd? I mean, Todd Blanche lost, just like Alina Habba lost. And maybe Todd Blanche lost because he was doing what Trump told him to. But Alina Habba got fired, basically. I mean, she still works for Trump World, but she's not his lawyer anymore, right? I mean, she's not going to be arguing cases. What do you think Trump is going to continue to be loyal to Todd Blanche?
Well, at this point in time, I'm not even sure that he has any alternatives,
Right.
right? What's he going to do? He's going to now elevate Susan Neckles, probably should have in the first place.
Right.
Emil Beauvais, he's going to up him or Chris Kise or somebody else. Listen, it's possible. But here's the bottom line. He got his ass kicked in the civil fraud trial to the tune of $500 million.
Mm-hmm.
He got his ass handed to him decisively with 34 criminal counts determined by 12 jurors as guilt. So what's next for him? Well, right now, the only thing that he really has going for him is that he will be the Republican nominee and that all of this goes away if, in fact, that he wins the election. So this is not an election anymore about becoming president to do right by the people of America, right? This is to make sure that you stay out of jail. This is Donald Trump's get out of jail free card. And that's about the only thing that right now he has going for him.
Do you think that Trump is going to win?
No. And in fact, as we were just talking about in the very first question that I asked you, why are the Republicans freaking out? Because 30% of the Republican Party, I always do this, and I've done this on this podcast before. I'm going to break it down into the simplest of numbers. If you have 100 million Republicans, 100 million Democrats, and 100 million independent voters, and of course the numbers aren't accurate, but let's just say hypothetically they are, and you lose 30% of your voting base, where do you make that number up? Well, the only place, there's not a Democrat out there that's going to vote for Donald Wackadoodle Trump over Joe Biden, especially not after him taking the credit for Roe v. Wade, the fact that, he's attacking veterans. I mean, on D-Day, the 80th anniversary, that he had this unhinged rally the other day in, where was it, Nevada, that people were passing out. And he was like, don't worry about it. I don't care about you. I care about your vote. And then he also loses the teleprompter and he starts going off some crazy rant about shark attacks and girls getting limbs taken off. And so, I mean, this is not, forget about presidential. If this was your crazy uncle during Thanksgiving, you'd have him, put into Bellevue or some other institution, because this is batshit crazy. So going back to my hypothetical here, you need to make that number up with independents, right? Okay. Let's even start and say that the only way for Donald Trump to win is to get that 30% back. That means that he has to get about 70% of independents to vote for him. But we already know that 65% of independents won't vote for him. So now it's really going to come down to the electoral map.
Do you think that Trump, you've seen him for such a long time and you really know him, do you think that he looks like, what I've been struck by when I watch his speeches, I don't want to say he's mellowed, because that's not really what it is, but he doesn't have the same level of energy he used to have. Do you notice that?
He doesn't look healthy, right? First of all, I believe that he's
tired, a little tired.
Yeah, I also think that he's on some sort of a semaglutide, whether it's an Ozempic or something like that. I mean, he has some good weight loss, which is important, for anybody who is as heavy as he was. I mean, I know that Ronnie Jackson and others claim that he's the healthiest president ever and that he's 6'3", 215. Now, just to give you the comparison on the 6'3", 215, you know who has those statistics?
Right.
That's Tom Brady. It's Tom Brady, right? Is 6'3", 215.
But I actually think that Trump, part of what helps Trump look younger is that he's a little heavier. And that part of what makes Biden look older is that he's so thin.
Yeah, well, that's true. But he, to me, looks very, very sick. He looks fragile. He looks weak. And worse than that, he looks incoherent. But let me go back and ask you, because I want to talk to you about your take on the overall take on the Trump trial, right? Because I know that you covered it extensively. Was there anything during that 5-week trial that shocked or surprised you?
Well, so the thing that I was struck by was that there was so much bad lawyering going on, and I had sort of understood Todd Blanche to be kind of a good lawyer. He had been a prosecutor and a pretty successful prosecutor. And so there were a lot of decisions that were made in the case that struck me as, for example, like David Pecker had him dead to rights. Why not go after David Pecker for the story? And instead he went after Stormy Daniels and had the lawyer be nice to David Pecker. Right. And going after Stormy Daniels then opened the door to all of this, them having sex stuff, which didn't need to be, was a door that did not need to be opened. Right.
Because was Todd Blanche though the lawyer that questioned Stormy, or was it Susan Neckles?
No, Susan Neckles. It seemed as if Trump was really running the show there. Right. Like saying to Susan, you've got to find out, because that sounded like him, right? I never had sex with her. She's lying. She's a horse-faced liar. That stuff felt very Trumpy to me. So what I was the most struck by looking back was just how many times during that trial it seemed as if the client was doing the lawyering, and much to the detriment of the client.
Well, in all fairness, though, Todd Blanche went on Fox the day after, I believe, the verdict, and he stated that the strategy was designed and implemented by Donald Trump. And that's why I turn around and I say
that's
that
why he
Todd
lost.
Blanche, and that's why I call him a sloped. I mean, if you are brought on to represent a former president in the first of its kind and unprecedented situation, where a former president is being charged with crimes and could ultimately end up incarcerated, you do not let that non-lawyer and somebody as impetuous as a Donald Trump, you don't let them design the strategy. Now, you said something that's interesting, though, that Todd Blanche is a former prosecutor and that he had a successful prosecutorial career. I would like for somebody to show me a prosecutor that didn't have a 98% conviction rate. They hold all the cards, all the power. He's no genius. None of them. They hold all the cards. They hold all the power. Just as soon as you start winning in court, they change the rules on you. They're already in it as my guys. My guy, the first thing he said to me, I'm talking about, what's his name? Nicholas Roos and the other asshole in my case. I'm blanking on his freaking name. Anyway, they turn around. The first thing they said is, we have a 98% conviction rate. If you think you're going to be part of the 2%, oh, by the way, we're also freezing all your accounts. And to add insult to injury, if you don't take our plea, we're filing an 80-page indictment against you that will include your wife. Tom McKay is who I was referring to. Meanwhile, they all end up, other than Nick Roos, I think he's still there, or he may have just left, but they all end up in these white shoe law firms,
Right. No, there's definitely a pipeline, a lawyer to prosecutorial pipeline for sure.
Yeah. So let
Yeah.
me ask you this then, because Alvin Bragg says that he'll sit down for an interview with Jim Bag Jordan and the
Right.
House after Trump's sentencing. And I agree with Bragg on this one. Do you think it's a good idea? And what does Bragg have to gain by going and participating in this? When my all-time favorite is when this conversation comes up, you always have Eric Swalwell with the Jim Bag Jordan calendar by the hour, showing how many days and how many hours since Jim Jordan was supposed to appear for a subpoena to testify and still has not. So what does Bragg have to gain by doing this?
What does Bragg have to do? I don't know. I don't know why Democrats do stuff like this. Like Jim Jordan ignored tons of subpoenas, right?
Yes.
I mean, I don't get it. I don't know why he would do that. I mean, I think, look, he's right to wait until sentencing is over, wait till the case is over. But
it's an active case.
Yeah, but the idea that he would, I mean, if it were, what this is like the fundamental problem with Democrats is they bring a stuffed animal to a knife fight every time. Like there's no reason on God's green earth why you need to testify for Jim Jordan, who is like Mr. Congressional Subpoena Ignorer. I absolutely do not get it. It makes no sense to me.
So I kind of like the idea of Bragg doing it only because the Republicans are running on this false notion that this is all a gigantic witch hunt, a setup, and so on. So I'm hoping that Bragg, who said that he will do it after Trump's sentencing, I hope that they include in that agreement that it be televised. So hypothetically, you're Jim Jordan and I'm Alvin Bragg, and you're asking me, some stupid question because Jim Jordan asks some of the stupidest, ill-prepared questions of anybody I've ever heard. And he turns around and he says, this is a witch hunt. You went ahead and you actually campaigned to become to become the district attorney of New York on getting Donald Trump. Did you not? And opening up the door for Bragg to turn around and say, I was following what I knew to be accurate.
Right.
And that was Donald Trump was guilty of business record fraud and campaign finance violation. I knew it then. I knew it when I brought the indictment. And I also knew it when 12 jurors chosen by the prosecutors and the defense came back in 9 hours, which is very quick, especially with a case like this, all 34 counts guilty. I like the visual, and I like that for Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that is worth thinking about here is that Trump and his people were like, we're going to get off. We have a juror who, we have this juror number whatever, who follows Truth Social, who looks like, I mean, it wasn't like none of this was a fait accompli. Everyone was on the, on Trump's side, on Biden's side. I mean, there is no Biden side, but on the defense's side, on the prosecution side, everyone was, I think, nobody knew what the jury was going to do because they were picked as jurors, and they were picked to be able to look at this trial in the way that a juror is supposed to, which is that you don't, your political beliefs are not involved in whether or not you think the defendant is guilty of the crime.
I totally agree. Now, what's interesting too, because again, you were so visible during this entire campaign. I mean, you were on so many MSNBC shows. It's like, I think you were on those panels for more than the 21 or 22 hours that I was on the stand. My question to you is, how many pundits, how many Trump supporters, how many moderators got it wrong. Dead wrong. How many people did you hear say, this is going to be a hung jury. It's a hung jury.
Yeah.
It's a weak case.
Yeah.
It's a weak
Yeah.
case. They've been saying that all along. Why prognosticate? I mean,
Right.
you just made a very important point. Jurors are chosen to be impaneled, to sit for that jury because they sign a pledge that they are not coming in with any preconceived notions. They're not coming in with any political, animus for or against, or any political biases
Beliefs.
towards
Yeah.
for the defendant. They're supposed to be impartial, and they were. So the question becomes, what were all of these pundits? What were all of these moderators? What were all these people on television predicating their belief off of, other than I think.
Vibes. Well, I also think Trump world is very good at working the refs, which is what we're seeing right now. They are very, very good at working the refs. And they said, this is a nothing burger. This isn't a real case. The only good case is and by the way, look, I think Trump benefited from two things. One, having unlimited money for his legal bills, right? I mean, he spent $100 million to punt those other three cases. And then he benefited from this, the Trump world has always said, if you try to hold him accountable, it will blow back on you, right? Something will happen. You'll lose because people don't like it. You'll do this. When you try to hold him accountable, he wins, And I think that they've sort of worked.
Elevate every morning with Tommy John's second skin underwear, because what you put in your pants can make or break your day. And the luxurious support of second skin guarantees that everything will go smoothly. And we need smooth. So when you wear Tommy John, you're much more comfortable. And when you're more comfortable, you can do everything better. Tommy John's stylish and soft second skin underwear has dozens of comfort innovations, like a supportive contour pouch and breathable, lightweight, moisture-wicking fabric with 4 times the stretch of competing brands. With over 20 million pairs sold and thousands of 5-star reviews, guys everywhere love their Tommy Johns. I mean, that's why Tommy John doesn't have customers. They have fanatics, like this one who raves, the most comfortable boxer briefs ever. There's no downside. Buy one pair and you'll never want to wear any other underwear again. I mean, I've been trying different brands of trunks for the past few months while wearing a similar product for the past 3 years. Second Skin is by far the most comfortable I've ever worn, hands down. I mean, that's my opinion, hands down. They are the most comfortable. And I know because they're soft and they hold you right where you need to be. So look, I'm certainly one who wears them. I am one who recommends them. Tommy John is the way that you want to go. Plus, here's another part. Plus, your most valuable assets are always covered with Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear, or its free guarantee. So get 20% off your first order right now at TommyJohn.com/Cohen. Save 20% on second skin at TommyJohn.com/Cohen. That's TommyJohn.com/Cohen. See the site for details.
They've been able to kind of get that sentiment into the pundit industrial complex. So you have pundits who are like, well, if we prosecute him, if we prosecute him, that's not what I mean. If he's prosecuted, then that helps him, or that makes him more likely to, win re-election, which is completely nonsensical and is really a product of Trump world working the refs.
But then you have, we'll call it, progressive radio or television. You have them putting on these Trumpers, whether it's the Jonathan Turdley, the lawyer, right, from GW Law School, right. Whether you have guys like David Schoen, whether you have guys like Jim Trusty or that guy
Right.
Bill Brannon. They brought him. How about Ari Melba, for example, bringing on Michael Avenatti, a guy that's sitting there right now in FCI, Terminal Island in California, for stealing money from clients, trying to extort Nike. He's got like another 9 years. They bring him on to give his opinion on what the value of this case is and what the likelihood of a conviction is. Well, he got it. They all got it dead wrong. And how many times have you and I even had conversations offline when we'd see each other in passing? And I turn around and I tell you, I'm telling you, they have him dead to right. This is a documentary evidence case. This is a case that's corroborated by
documents.
19 by 19 other witnesses other than myself.
What I thought was really well done was the way Alvin Bragg's office started with all of these other pieces of evidence and then brought you in to put it all together. I definitely felt like watching it that it was like, this was like, it did feel like this was, I don't know. I felt like I thought they did it in a way that was really that where everything worked on each other, and it felt very much, and everything was, you could see the text messages at the times, you could see, and they couldn't, they just kept arguing about things that were almost irrelevant.
Well, that's what they did. I mean, again, it's why he's the sloat. And the stupidest move, was putting Bob Costello on the stand, especially considering that Donald knows exactly why Bob Costello was brought in. They know exactly why Jeff Citron, the partner at the firm that Bob Costello was affiliated, was brought in. They know exactly what they were doing. Why would you put this guy up thinking that the prosecutors didn't have information within which to rebut this maniac? I mean, seriously?
And the Bob Costello stuff really made it seem like a mafia thing. Like, we're going to keep Michael in line. We're going to make sure we're going to do this for the big boss. I mean, like, that really seemed like it sort of put it over the top. And it felt like real substantive proof that you were actually being
set up.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing? They didn't need Bob Costello. They didn't need Jeff Citron. They didn't need anybody. All Donald had to do, right, is reach out, make sure that the legal fees were paid for. Instead, they started with this nonsense. And the problem for Donald is, the old expression, penny wise, pound foolish?
Right.
Donald is penny wise, pound stupid. Because all he needed to do, going back at that point in time, is don't leave me on my own.
Right.
I mean, you have to understand, I have in my entire life, I have one speeding ticket.
Right.
That's the closest I've ever come to dealing with law enforcement for myself. Right. I have a speeding ticket from 1985. I was a sophomore in college driving my car back through New Jersey. I was going 13 miles an hour over the speed limit, and I got pulled over. Other than that, I've never had, I have no open parking tickets. I have nothing.
Right.
Nothing. And instead, I am now confronted with an FBI raid, 60 FBI agents over the hotel I was staying at, my home, my law firm, and safety deposit box. Really? And you're going to turn around and listen to the likes of Kushner or Don Jr. or Steve Bannon or whoever else was giving Donald information and saying to him, you got to cut the guy loose. Well, now you got a $500 million problem on your hand and 34 convictions. Now, I'm not saying that, this is out of revenge, right? This was as a result of me deciding that I was not going to remain loyal to a guy who was completely disloyal to me, and I told the truth, and it's the truth that caused all of the issues for him. So if you wanted somebody not to tell the truth, well, how about don't throw them under the bus? I told Emily Jane Fox of Vanity Fair, it was August of 2018. I said to her that, yeah, I would take a bullet for the guy. And I truly meant it, except if he's the one pulling the trigger. And in this specific case, he was the one pulling the trigger. Exactly. Hey, let me ask you this then. Do you believe that Trump being a criminal will have a lasting impact on the Republican Party's identity and their platform? Because they call themselves the party of law and order. But in fact, they're really acting like a party of thugs, of no law and no order. So what is this new Republican Party supposed to be about?
Well, so what I think it is that Trump was charismatic and captured an electorate that Republicans were having trouble capturing, right? This voter that doesn't necessarily have a college degree. Trump pushed a populist message. I think it resonated with them. In 2016, there was low enthusiasm about Hillary, and I think it was just a sort of moment where he caught fire. Since then, he has not won any elections, but he has captured the Republican Party, right? The leadership, there's no one in that party today who has not sworn loyalty up and down to Donald Trump. And if they haven't, they're not in the party anymore, right? Like Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. I mean, it's sort of, you either are one of Trump's people or you're out. So the question now, I think, is where does it go, right? I mean, he hasn't won. His people haven't necessarily won. I mean, I wonder how long he can ride this thing until Republicans get sick of losing. Now, if Trump wins in 2024, Republicans will say, he was great. We always, had faith in the guy. If he loses, which you and I both actually believe that he will, though the stakes are so impossibly high. I mean, my God. But if he does lose, I think that Republicans will be like, oh, we never, I think they'll finally have had enough, because they've given him so many chances.
Yeah, you hope, and then you have to hope that people like this J.D. Vance or the Josh Hawleys or the Matt Gaetzes or the Marjorie Toilet Greens or the Ted Cruzes or the Mike Johnsons. You can go on and name all day long. I could keep naming them, that they don't try to become, or the little Marco Rubio, that they don't try to become Donald Trump 2.0, right? Because he has now opened up a Pandora's box, which I don't think is going to be so easy to close. And that's why I was asking you, what's the new Republican Party supposed to be about? They're not about the old Republican Party, about conservative values. They're about now, white nationalism. They're about Christian nationalism. They're about, turning America back into a white Christian nationalistic country, which, interestingly enough, as I have asked a few different people over a period of time, when was America ever a white Christian nationalist country? And the answer is never.
Yeah, I mean, look, Republicans have sort of like Trumpism got. I think that electorate, that Trumpy electorate, is something they desperately want to win. If you look at these Republican policies, they're not super popular, right? Most people believe in some amount of abortion access, whatever that looks like. They don't want to ban birth control. They don't want to ban, a lot of this stuff is pretty out there, right? You have in the Project 2025, which is part of the Heritage Foundation, they want to regulate in vitro fertilization, right? They don't want to regulate gasoline or,
firearms.
Right, firearms, but they want to regulate IVF. They're lower taxes for very wealthy people, right? I mean, so I don't, this is a lot of these values are a hard sell. What if you think about like earlier Republicans, people like Reagan or Bush, they sold a sort of patriotism, right? Like in America that wins wars and brings democracy. This new right is not interested in any of that, right? They don't want to win
No.
wars. They don't want to bring democracy. They don't even really like democracy. So if Trump does lose, which I think a lot is riding on that, I think there's going to be a real soul searching, because I don't know how you get people to vote for something that isn't so popular. If he wins, I think American democracy. I don't think we have elections.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, just on that point, it's like, how then would you interpret the current backlash against progressive policies such as women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, and critical race theory? Is it just anti-woke MAGAs, or do you sense that the country and our civil rights are actually going backwards instead of forward?
Well, so I think there are a couple different things going on. Things like abortion and birth control pills and those kind of things. That is so, like, the right to have an abortion, that's gone, right? That was a right women had for 53 years, gone. So now the question is, they actually had it for a little less than 50 years, but so that's gone. Will that right come back? Probably not, though they could codify Roe. Congress could codify Roe and there would be some protection, but it's still, uh, um, other questions about like so I think that is a clear politically, that is clearly for the Democrats, right? Republicans, they just can't message on it. They can't run from it fast enough. And you see that with Trump. He doesn't want to answer the question. He doesn't want to be on the record. And then when it comes to other stuff, right? Like, there are things that Republicans have working for them. Like, a lot of voters don't like the protests, right? They don't like it. They think it looks like the 1960s with the Vietnam protests. And people in states that don't have these kind of urban environments, they don't like protests. And so that is something that Republicans, if they were a little more organized, and you see the House Republicans are trying to do that. They like went to Columbia in the hopes of like saying, Democrats do protest. Now, this would work a lot better for them if they weren't running against someone like Joe Biden, who is quite old and quite conservative, right? He's not some radical leftist. I mean, remember with Obama, they could make this case that because he had gone to school in Chicago and because he had studied with, Bill Ayers from the Weather Underground, that he was some kind of radical. But it's hard to make a case that Joe Biden is anything other than like an old, very centrist Democrat. And so in that sense, I think that Republicans have a lot of trouble with him. And one of the reasons why he was such a good candidate in 2020, and I actually think this is still true, was that he's really not, he's just a sort of, very down the middle Democrat. And he's going to do things that are disappointing to progressives, but he's also going to make it, he's going to do a speech like that speech he did at Pointe du Hoc, where he basically did an homage to Reagan. And, the reality is the Republican Party of Reagan is much closer aligned to the Democratic Party of now than it is to the MAGA movement.
Yeah, well, the only thing the MAGA movement is close to is the Third Reich. So let me then ask you, since we're talking about the Bidens, because you wrote about the Hunter Biden trial saying, and I'm going to quote, "For years, Republicans have used pictures of Hunter Biden strung out on crack as some kind of an indictment of his father."
Yeah.
When I see those pictures, I see a warning. What warning do you see?
So it's what they've done is there's been this Republican effort to try to sully Joe Biden, right? They want to, what Steve Bannon says, they want to flood the zone with excrement. They want people to think, well, they're both corrupt, so we might as well go with the corrupt guy who's funny versus the corrupt guy who broke his foot, And I think that that is a very typical sort of thing that you see in an autocracy where you sort of the propaganda is meant to sully both parties. See that
Mhm.
in Russia, you see that in Turkey, you see that. But so what I think is stupid about that is that like 20% of the country, maybe a little less, are addicts or alcoholics. So that means that huge numbers of this country have had their lives affected by alcoholism, right? And if you have an alcoholic parent, I have an alcoholic, I'm sober since I was 19, but I also have an alcoholic parent. And if you have an alcoholic parent, you don't look at pictures of Hunter Biden strung out and think, he sucks. You look at him and you think, like, this guy has real problems. And real problems do not necessarily equal corruption, right? Like I don't know what Hunter Biden did or didn't do, but the idea that him being an alcoholic somehow makes him a bad person is not going to resonate
Right.
with the people who have alcoholics in their lives because they know it's an illness.
But
And
this is more.
also,
But this is more than just alcohol. I mean,
no, he's a
obviously,
crack addict. Yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
is right. He was, and
Right. He
right,
was.
he was
But
on
but
crack.
it's
Now,
right.
but now he's clean, and
Yeah.
you know what? I don't think, and I really believe this. I don't think I know a single person. I lost two of my
Right.
oldest and closest friends to drugs, to
Yeah.
overdose, and I
Yes.
can tell you, I don't know a single person out there who doesn't have a connection to somebody who is an addict on something.
Right.
Right,
And that
and what you do is, it's like what you have to do is you have to sort of like you pray to
right.
Hashem or to your God,
Right.
right? And say when you have a child that this child should be, good and it should not end up on drugs and they should
Yeah.
be smart and all 10 fingers and 10 toes,
Yeah.
right? But you always throw in there that they should, have the willpower and the self-control. Everybody may not be in your family, but everybody knows somebody that has a drug problem. When I see Hunter Biden, I'm going to tell you what I see. I see a guy who's very fortunate that he has a family, a strong family behind him, whether it's his father, whether it's his stepmom, whether it's his daughter, right, or his children, his other relatives. They stood behind this guy when he was
Right.
rock bottom, when he hit the bottom. They stuck behind him, and you know what? For that, he's been able to hold himself together, still understanding that once an addict, always an addict.
Yeah.
I think it's so wrong what Republican revenge is doing, especially in this specific area, because Republicans don't think you should have to fill out any forms in order to get a gun. So
Right.
therefore, if you didn't have to fill out a form in the first place, what's the charge against Hunter Biden about now? None. See, that's the problem with the Republican revenge. They're looking for something, and the more that they keep looking, the stupider it makes them look.
Yeah. I think well it's like one of the moments in the debate that worked so well for Biden was when he was saying, "I'm proud of my son for being sober." And it worked well because it showed that he was just a human being like everyone else. And I don't think so it's more just like if you're going to attack someone for having had a drug problem and you're going to attack I mean a lot of these attacks are like Biden wasn't a good father, but if it's genetic, which I actually think it is, then this has nothing to do with what kind of parent he is. And so I do really think that this could bite them. I also think like both Trump and Biden don't drink, right? They both don't drink because they both have family histories of alcoholism, right? Mary said her dad died of alcoholism. So here is this it's a family disease and they're going after like I can't speak to whether or not Hunter lied on that form or whether or not he broke federal law, but I can speak to the optics of going after someone who is sober, who was a crack addict, and it strikes me as a dangerous gamble for Republicans.
Yeah, I think so too. So let me just switch gears for a quick second. Hungary's Viktor Orban
Yeah.
seized control of universities and the courts and did what Trump said that he intends to do,
Right.
rewrote the Constitution. But Republicans like J.D. Vance think that Orban made a smart decision. Now, along with the 2025 project, the right is advocating for authoritarianism. You think that regular American voter actually understands what authoritarianism means, what Project 2025 is espousing?
So that is the $24 million question, right? Is, do we think that voters get what Trump is saying? Because remember, you'll have voters say things like, well, maybe we should live in an authoritarian country. So what 2025 wants to do is it's going to take over the federal government. It's going to take agencies like HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and it's going to fire all of the, like, in the federal government, there are tens of thousands of federal workers who are nonpartisan, right? They have jobs that are not political in any way, right? They're picking out sites for, buildings for HUD, right? They're doing plumbing surveys for HUD buildings there. And the idea is you're going to fire all of those people, every single one, and you're going to replace them with loyalists. So, for example, HUD will no longer be this nonpartisan housing and urban development. It will be an arm of the Trump campaign, whatever that looks like. So it'll be every part of the federal government will really work for Trump and not for the people of this country. Now, if you love Trump, maybe you think you want this. But let me tell you why you don't want this. It's because a lot of the jobs the federal government does, and again, we like to complain about the federal government, don't get me wrong, but a lot of jobs like the air, the air controllers, or the, things, the FDA, right? Or the EPA. These are jobs that you really want the people who do them, the experts, to do them, and not just like Stephen Miller's cousin. You don't want like crony friends of Trump. You really want people who know how to do plumbing surveys for HUD. And so there are two things that will happen. One is it will cause lots of problems that we can't even quantify. But the other thing that will happen is that Trump will have so much unchecked power that he will be like a dictator plus.
Well, he wants to be the dictator. He's even said so himself. I'm not, as much as I'm worried about the EPA, and we should all be worried about, because climate change is real, despite the fact that Donald will tell you about his connection to MIT. Did you see that in his crazy rant? By the way, you know what his connection to MIT is? He had an uncle 30 years ago that was a professor there. I think his name was also Donald. Right. Something like that. I mean, that's his big connection. So what?
Yeah.
I have an uncle who graduated #1 in his class at NYU Law School. Does that mean that I should go walking through the halls? Or nieces, my kids went to UPenn and stuff like that. Well, I had two nieces who were #1 ranked tennis player in New York. Does that mean that I can go walk onto the court and go play with Djokovic? I mean, it's so stupid. His rationalization is insane, but Donald Trump turned around and he made a statement whereby it's like, I will become a dictator on day #1. And you know what? He's not joking. I'm not so worried about the air controllers of the FAA or the EPA. I'll tell you what I'm more worried about is the DOJ, where he puts in another Bill Barr 2.0.
Oh, yeah.
And shame on every member of Congress, Republican and Democrat alike, for not figuring out how to get Bill Barr before a committee, not being able to get all the documents between Trump and Bill Barr. And you can see exactly the damage that these two ass clowns did to this country during those crazy 4 years, those chaotic 4 years. And it's very reminiscent of like what's going on right now in Israel or what's going on in Europe, where, the far right is beginning to get a stronghold by stoking fear of like immigration. If I hear one more person turn around and tell me, yeah, but do you see what's going on in America with migration and so on? I mean, look what's going on in New York. I saw so far, and I've been here, I've never left, right? I have seen 5 migrants, and I walk the streets everywhere. I mean, I've walked past, down Lexington Avenue all the way into the 20s, back up to the Upper East Side. I would have passed. I've seen 5 migrants. And how is it affecting your life? Do they come and move into your building?
No.
Are they living in your center hall? I mean, all of a sudden, this stoking of the fear, right, leads to fascism. We saw it in the 1930s. We saw it, right? We saw it in the rise of the Third Reich. And I hate to say it, that's what this white nationalism, that's what this Christian nationalism is all about. It's stoking fear. It's stoking hatred against another group of people who are weaker than you.
Yeah, no. I agree. It's, I agree. I think it's very much it's disturbing, it's shocking, and I totally agree, and also I think that, it's the fundamental tenet of Trumpism is this idea. I don't know how, the thing that I never understood is he's so incredibly
stupid.
Well, no, I was going to say it's so racist,
sexist,
but that
misogynistic, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic.
But it's sexist, it's racist, but then he somehow is able to make it appeal to Hispanic voters. That I don't understand.
I don't understand how anybody, especially a woman, I can't understand how there's a single black woman that would potentially vote for him. I mean, I don't get it.
I don't think that's a big group.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I mean,
and
but who
again,
knows?
if black women are not voting for him, black men won't vote for him either.
Right.
Because they talk about things like this. They're very open about, who they want to vote for, why they want to vote for.
Yeah.
That husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, neighbors, friends, they talk about this. And
right.
I just don't get it. I want to ask you this. Let's talk about the election for a moment, right? What's your take on where the media is right now? Because I'm going to tell you what pisses me the fuck off.
Yeah.
Really pisses me off. The amount of time that's being given to Trump, good or bad, how they justify it, the fact that they show him leaving Mar-a-Lago, right? Like the king is leaving, all the way to his 757 plane at the private airfield, immediately taking off. They track him. They track him through TrackWare, right?
Yes.
Then when he lands and comes out, they got the cameras there as they have this motorcade waiting for him in New York, shutting down the roads and the highways, inconveniencing tax-paying New Yorkers for this piece of shit, all the way till he gets finally to Trump Tower, where he comes out and he says a few nasty choice words about the judge, the prosecutors, the witnesses, about the jurors, about everybody. But we just gave him 4 hours worth of free coverage. Have you ever wished that you had whiter and a brighter smile? Well, before you visit a dentist, you should know that their whitening treatments, they're very expensive. And you know what? It's not just the price. You also have to book the appointment, schedule time away from work or family to sit in a dentist's office chair while undergoing this procedure. It's a hassle. Fortunately, now you can try Smile Actives at home or anywhere, anytime. Smile Actives offers a safe and an affordable alternative to those expensive whitening procedures. You see, I've had past experience with these whitening agents, and I got to tell you, I hated it. It causes these zingers afterwards. It's really uncomfortable. And I'm a big coffee drinker. And so I hate to say it, your teeth get stained. But that's why it's so important to use Smile Actives, because it brings you a bright smile, and a bright smile makes a good impression. Smile Actives makes a teeth whitening gel that can simply be added to your toothpaste every time that you brush your teeth. So there's no change in your routine, there's no extra time, and there's no messy strips, trays, or lights. Simply add Smile Active's Pro Whitening Gel to your regular toothpaste. It's been formulated with polyclean technology to boost stain removal and deliver active whitening ingredients into teeth's grooves and crannies so that you get better whitening. 97% of Smile Active's users in a clinical trial reported up to 6 shades whiter on average. Listen to what I just said, up to 6 shades whiter on average, and all within 30 days. I mean, that's the kind of trial that I like. So what are you waiting for? Start getting comments on your whiter, brighter smile in just days. So visit smileactives.com/Cohen today to receive a special buy one, get one free offer with auto delivery, plus free shipping and handling. That's smileactives.com/Cohen. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. I think the media has to stop. You don't see that from Biden.
No. I mean, the thing I don't think it's necessarily bad to cover his crazy speeches if you fact check them, because sometimes you have to hear how crazy he is to like make it make sense. So some of those speeches where he says stuff like about Hannibal Lecter or how great,
shark attacks are, or
right.
Getting electrocuted with a boat that has powered by batteries. I've never seen I haven't seen one boat yet that's solely powered by batteries.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I too have not ever seen that.
I mean, maybe, maybe a boat that your 5-year-old is going to cruise around in your swimming pool with, but that's about. I don't understand it. Well, look, none of it makes any sense, and I think the only thing to do is, the problem with fact checking is the number of lies that he spews in a period of a minute. You cannot actually appropriately fact check all of those lies, other than just to say, yeah, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. You really have to know your stuff, and it's not easy. But hey, Molly, can I ask you this? Because you recently wrote an article about the effects that abortion bans are having in Louisiana. And you said, and I quote, "It has become clear that pregnant women are getting a lower standard of care post-Roe because doctors who don't want to lose their licenses," right? Which is out-fucking-rageous.
Yeah.
But what are some of the other negative effects on women as well?
So one of the things that is really interesting is that you have these doctors who don't want to treat in the first trimester because they're worried about if a woman has a miscarriage, that they will somehow be prosecuted for giving an abortion. And that is something that, if you look back to 1973, the reason why Roe was so broadly decided back then was because you had doctors afraid to treat women. You had this idea that you had the law all of a sudden was in these operating rooms, right? You had, if this was an abortion, it just sort of opened the door to all sorts of problems that would not have otherwise existed if abortion were between a doctor and a woman. And the whole idea here is a false premise, right? The idea here is that women get abortions, and this is a Trump thing, right? I mean, the Republican Party was involved in this before Trump, but the idea is that women get abortions as birth control, which we know is not true, right? We know that abortion is super traumatic for the woman to go through, and the stories I've talked to doctors who perform abortions, I mean, these women are desperate women who are, I I talked to a doctor right before they stopped doing abortions in Arizona, and she had a woman who had been gang raped
Mhm.
walking from South America, and she was able to get an abortion right before they stopped abortions. And I mean, that is completely just that is just a completely nightmarish scenario. I mean, people are not getting abortions because they are lazy and can't, find birth control. I mean, and I think that you're seeing just these pregnant women get a much lower standard of care, which
And
is really disturbing.
the big fear
Yeah.
is that it's going to revert back to those back alley abortions. I mean, I want my listeners to just understand really the extent of what Molly was writing about in that article. There's what she's referring to is what's called a DNC, right? It stands
Right.
for dilation and curettage.
Right.
What happens there is there's the uterine lining, right, which is called the endometrium, and part of that remains in after the birth, right, and
Right.
you need to remove it, this abnormal
Right.
tissue, because the failure to remove this abnormal tissue ends up causing infections, sepsis, and other complications that can prevent a healthy woman,
From being able to have children
from being
ever
able to
again.
have children in the future.
Yeah.
It causes all sorts of issues to the uterus, and
Yeah.
it causes death.
Yeah.
It
It can
causes
cause
terrible
sepsis.
sepsis where
Yeah.
you get sick and then you will die. And the fact of the matter is the CPT coding for a
Yeah.
DNC is the same as if it was for an abortion. So they are grouping that as one. There's so many of these cases you see on television. There was a man with his wife, and unfortunately, the baby died in utero, and
Yes.
they
I
had
saw
to,
that.
and the doctors
Yeah.
were afraid to do the DNC because
Yeah.
despite they want this woman to have to carry the child, the
Yeah.
deceased child in utero to term.
Yep.
Otherwise, they themselves can be charged with murder. And then the
Yep.
crazy thing, so could the husband, so could the doctor, so
Mhm.
could the nurse who scheduled the appointment. They want to hold every single person who has their fingers attached or that they could point a finger to.
Yeah.
They want to hold them accountable and charge them as like a co-conspirator to murder. That's how crazy that this thing has gotten.
Yeah. That's right.
And
And I think, and I would say that I don't think voters like it. I don't think pregnant women like it because it's really scary and it means your doctor is scared to treat you and you can't get, like in the first trimester, that's when the fetus is forming. And sometimes, you need to be able to get the vitamins you need, and blood tests can show if you're not having enough folic acid. I mean, these are times when you really need treatment. So you have these doctors who are afraid to treat, which is it's really scary. And there's a larger, terrifying,
And my hope is,
you know,
my hope is, Molly, that the largest voting bloc that we have coming up in this November 2024 election will be Gen Zers. All
I
right,
know. I
between
hope
Gen
so.
Zers, women, and Black women.
Yeah.
If we get the Gen Zers, if we get the Black women, and so on, and women in total who outnumber men anyway, this isn't even an election anymore. So look, Molly, the hour comes by and it goes real fast here on Mea Culpa. I have one
Right.
last question for you. I
Yeah.
have one last question for you.
Please.
Like me, you worried about the outcome of the election in November?
Yes. I
And
am. I
why?
mean, yeah, because it's not a normal election, right? Biden is not running against Mitt Romney. He's not running against Nikki Haley. He's not even running against Ted Cruz, right? He's running against someone who has promised to disassemble the federal government, who has said that he is going to end American democracy as we know it. So I'll be worried until I definitely am quite worried, and this is no way to go through life. I mean, this is just such a it's such a high stakes, crazy. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I
with
said on
you.
Ali Velshi the other day, what everybody really needs to be worried about is the retribution, the revenge
Yeah.
that he
Oh,
has already talked about again and again and again, using SEAL Team 6 to go against his critics, to go against his political enemies. Because look, one thing that people really need to start talking about a little more, this is not idle conversation. This is
yeah.
not just bullshit
Yeah.
Donald talk. He did it to me once already.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am the product of what he now knows that he can do and get away with, especially if you have a willing and complicit attorney general, if you actually have willing and
Mm-hmm.
complicit members of the military, if you have willing and complicit members who are running the DOJ and other factions of the United States government.
Yeah,
To him, then, it's
absolutely.
merely the king has spoken. So it has been said, so it shall be done.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Oh,
Yep. Well, Molly, thank you for joining me
thank
as
you.
always. You make us
Thank
all
you
a
for
whole lot
having me.
smarter, and appreciate your writings. Appreciate you
Well, I'm
appearing,
so
and yeah, it's scary.
delighted to talk to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Molly. Great to see you.